the viability of the business model of media companies has been completely torpedoed. That fake news has already existed. Fake news existed pre-internet. Are you going to be able to just rip out all fake news from these content platforms? No, you can't. We've seen that. It's a never-ending battle. On the show, we've talked a lot about fake news. We've talked a lot about the need for platforms to be more open rather than more closed. And there is something interesting. We didn't really cover it fully on the show, but this was actually from a few weeks ago. You know, fake news has certainly been exacerbated in, say, the past 10, 20 years, right? Certainly kind of with the rise of the internet, the rise of content platforms like Google and Facebook, which have just obliterated the business model of the news media publications, right? So you had businesses which were once viable and now their business model is not viable and they need to make money somehow, some way. Actually, not somehow, literally any way possible, they need to make money. There was a broadcast this morning that I was listening to from the Economic Club in New York with John Elkin, the CEO of Exor. Exor is an insanely cool holding company that owns small companies like Fiat Chrysler, some of you might be familiar with. Also, a competitor to what is Caterpillar called C&H Industrial. They also own The Economist and a variety of things, right? So they own a variety of different businesses. But anyway, he was talking about their investment thesis for The Economist. What his thesis is that you need to, if you can create really high quality content, you can have a subscription business and you can move away from the ad revenue model, which is what a Google and a Facebook rely upon. And they need to have a viable business in the sense that they need to have a profitable business that is sustainable if they want to protect their journalistic integrity, right? If the company is hemorrhaging money, then their reporters and journalists, he didn't explicitly say this, but he kind of intimated that, right? If you're a media business and your media business is not doing well and it's hemorrhaging money, your reporters and journalists, their integrity, their journalistic integrity will naturally be sacrificed so that you can write articles that, might be more triggering, might trend higher on social media, so you get more ad clicks or revenue, or you trigger your audience to be more viral and get more hopefully revenue. Short-term gain for long-term pain, right? You might get some short-term immediate ad revenue, or you might get a subscription for a month, but if the journalistic quality and integrity isn't there long-term, the business will deteriorate. That was my takeaway from it, from what he was saying. And I think if we look at very simply what these social media platforms do, we will see why the rise of fake news is because of two things. One, the viability of the business model of media companies, it's been completely torpedoed. So you had now businesses that aren't making money, that are hemorrhaging money, and they got to figure out any way possible to try to just break even, which has been largely impossible for the majority of them. So now you have kind of journalistic integrity, and that stuff is at risk. And the second point here is how network effects work, how virality works on social platforms and content platforms. I'm going to touch on an article on this in a second here to really call this out. But because of that, and because of how social platforms like Facebook, how that black box, that matchmaking algorithm works, how it figures out what to put in front of Alex or anyone's Facebook news feed, it is going to show you stuff which gets the most engagement. And very often, I think what we'll find and what some of these articles that I'm about to go over show is that very often the stuff that gets the most engagement on Facebook is stuff that is incendiary, is triggering, is going to evoke some kind of an emotional reaction, which plays to, whatever kind of stereotype, bias, social profiling metrics Facebook has on you. And it's because of these kind of hyper-targeted kind of sandboxes where you have these echo chambers, right? Where Facebook has figured out the magic algorithm, say, yes, feed this kind of content to Alex, and he's going to click and share that and like it and comment, and all the engagement metrics are going to be off the charts. And Alex is going to want to keep coming back to Facebook. And then as a result, you have all the media organizations trying to play the Facebook game. And they know that when they write stuff, which is triggering and incendiary and yada, 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 checks all the boxes, gets Alex all worked up, then their article gets more views, they get more ad revenue, and you have the vicious cycle, which is modern day journalism. So here's a couple articles here that I thought would be interesting. So this just came out in the past couple weeks. This is the testimony of Tim Kendall. He's in front of, it's the House Committee on Energy, but don't pay attention to the energy part. Pay attention to the House Committee on Commerce. And this guy used to work at Facebook. And so I'll just highlight a few pieces here. But he came out to kind of talk exactly about this echo chamber, about this kind of vicious cycle, which is what Facebook has set up here. So this is him kind of recounting, instead, the social media services that I and others have built over the past 15 years, he was early on at Facebook, have served to tear people apart with alarming speed and intensity. At the very least, we have eroded our collective understanding. At worst, I fear we are pushing ourselves to the brink of civil war. I feel ashamed by this outcome and yada, yada, yada. Okay. My path in technology started at Facebook, where I was the first director of monetization. Read, this guy needs to figure out how to make money off the content, right? I thought my job was to figure out the business model for the company, and presumably one that sought to balance the needs of its stakeholders. And instead, we sought to mine as much attention as humanly possible and turn it into historically unprecedented profits, right? This is attention. This is Alex engaging, Alex coming back. Alex is addicted. Alex needs to get that piece of triggering incendiary content because that is going to elicit the most engagement and attention from Alex. And that translates to dollars and profits. Okay. Tim, take us away. To do this, we didn't simply create something useful and fun. We took a page from Big Tobacco's Playbook, working to make our offering addictive at the outset. Tobacco companies initially just sought to make nicotine more potent, but eventually that wasn't enough to grow the business, and they added sugar. At Facebook, we added status updates, photo tagging, and likes, which made status and reputation primary and laid the groundwork for a teenage mental health crisis. Yikes. Allowing for misinformation, conspiracy theories, and fake news to flourish were like Big Tobacco's bronchodilators, which allowed the cigarette smoke to cover more surface area of the lungs. But that incendiary content wasn't enough. To continue to grow the user base, and in particular the amount of time and attention users would surrender to Facebook, they needed more. Tobacco companies added ammonia, and for Facebook, extreme incendiary content. Think shocking images, graphic videos, and headlines that incite outrage, sowed tribalism and division. And this result has been unprecedented engagement and dollar signs. Facebook's ability to deliver this incendiary content to the right person at the right time in the exact right way, that is their pneumonia. Social media preys on the most primal parts of the brain. The algorithm maximizes your attention by hitting you repeatedly with content that triggers your strongest emotions. It aims to provoke, shock, and enrage. Ooh, I'm getting chills. And this ringing bells for any of you, right? In terms of the type of stuff. Oh, I see this on my feed. Oh, gets you so jacked up, right? It knows how to elicit that emotion out of you. When you see something you agree with, you feel compelled to defend it. When you see something that you don't agree with, you feel compelled to attack it. People on the other side of the issue have the same impulses. The cycle continues with the algorithm in the middle, happily dealing arms to both sides in an endless war of words and misinformation. All the while, the technology is getting smarter and better at provoking a response from triggering you. It's like Facebook's algorithm is the ultimate trigger master of the 21st century, right? They're the ultimate ability to know I'm going to poke you right here and bam, this is going to get you all worked up. And now I'm going to get my attention and I can monetize more attention. He goes on. These algorithms have brought out the worst in us. They've literally rewired our brains so that we're detached from reality and immersed in tribalism. It's not by accident. It's an algorithm. It's a playbook. He goes on to cite, more examples of this. So internal analysis at Facebook found 64% of all extremist group joins. So that's people joining extremist groups, right? Were due to their own recommendations tools. Yet repeated attempts to counteract this problem were ignored or shut down, right? So Facebook is doing such a good job of helping extremist, groups on Facebook get more, subscribers and participants because it has figured out, this is an extreme topic. This is who would play into these extreme issues, and boom, yeah, it works. 64% of that of the group joins are from basically the recommendation algorithms. Yikes. So to be clear, social media is not the root cause of every problem we're facing, but I believe it may be the most powerful accelerant in history. These services are making us sick. These services are dividing us. It's time we take account of the damage. It's time we put in place the necessary measures to protect ourselves and our country. Very interesting. We haven't exactly hit on this on the show to date, about this, about the role of platforms helping to make fake news basically, fake news be rewarded for being fake. The content creators have now learned what the algorithm likes. The content creators content creators being media, feed up content to the algorithm. Their algorithm does its job and bam, 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 feeds it out to whoever's going to have that incendiary extreme reaction to it. It's a self-serving prophecy, right? Both sides are in on it, Facebook and the media orgs. And, the media orgs are addicted to it and Facebook is addicted to it. So what do you do? And what Tim here is saying is, basically remove the protection that hopefully, he doesn't caveat it like we do on the show where we say, relieving some of that Section 230 protection as it relates to tech monopolies like Facebook could help alleviate some of this problem, right? But again, if it's a broad-based Section 230 dilution, then you're actually going to do more harm than good because you're going to hurt other tech startups and smaller tech competitors, and the platform monopolies will ultimately benefit, unless that carve out of Section 230 protection is really just specific to the tech monopolies. Why I bring this up is Facebook understands the power that it holds. And we actually saw it on display how well they understand this, right? Because yes, they're doing content moderation. We've spoken at length about content moderation and policies and what you can take down and penalize. And Facebook has now kind of set up like a Supreme Court of content moderators, an external tribunal to inform policy on content moderation. But none of that touches the mechanics of how Facebook works. None of that touches how virality works. But what did Facebook do recently? Just a few weeks ago, Facebook came out with this article. Facebook to block new political ads 1 week before November 3rd, add more tools and rules for fair elections. Now, it's not in the header. But deeper down in this article and others, what Facebook talks about is how they're going to put controls on how information and articles are shared within the platform. Look at this. And given how a lot of misinformation is also shared through direct channels off Facebook itself, it's also going to limit how things can be forwarded on Messenger to stem how content goes viral on there. You'll still be able to share information about the election, but we'll limit the number of chats you can forward a message to at one time. And there are other things that Facebook is putting into place 1 week before the election, which is basically limiting how content is shared and engaged and emphasized through these trigger points, right? By limiting things like, hey, you can only share this with these many people, posting content to groups, or other kinds of sharing metrics or commenting controls, right? It'll have an impact. Is it a huge impact? No. But these kinds of controls, these are the kinds of controls that Tim is getting at, in the sense that this Facebook machine, and it's not Facebook alone, other content social media platforms also, but they have built the matchmaking algorithm. They have built these mechanisms to promote the virality, right? To feed you this content and then have that get shared and bounced around to all your friends, and the spiral just takes off, and that's how things get trending. I think there might be putting some limits on how things are trending or what goes into the trending feed and other things like this, right? They're going to tinker with the ability to share and a little bit of the algorithm a week before the November 3rd election. And that really is this accelerant that Tim is getting at, right? That fake news has already existed. Fake news existed pre-internet, right? These journalists and media publications, they didn't ever get everything right, either accidentally or probably some stuff maliciously, but they were a lot more integrity driven when they had a profitable business pre-2000, right? In the 20th century. Now you had their business becoming not profitable or anywhere near sustainable, and you've got the engine that is Facebook and social media and content platforms that thrive off of basically what is fake news. And the matchmaking and the algorithms and the sharing and the trending and all this infrastructure and the way these platforms work basically reward fake news. So, you put those two things together and it's the perfect storm. It's what Tim is getting at here. So what's the solution? Are you going to be able to just rip out all fake news from these content platforms? No, you can't. We've seen that. It's a never-ending battle, and it seems like the solution now is to try and use 230 as a way to hold the platforms more liable for taking a more active role in the content that they're publishing, and have them take less of a role taking content off the platform. That's the irony in all of this, right? I mean, if you remove the 230 provision to the 230 protection, is Facebook going to be treated as a publisher? And because fake news is published on Facebook, now Facebook's going to be liable to get sued? I don't think that's what happens. If anything, I think it goes in the other direction, which is actually the direction I prefer, which is more open rather than more closed, right? So I think actually Facebook says, you know what? If we do try to take a more active role to curate this ecosystem, if we do try to take a more active role to figure out what is appropriate and inappropriate, then we will be regarded as a publisher. So to avoid being regarded as a publisher, because, I don't know, probably 50+% of the stuff on Facebook is fake and they could be liable for, we just are not going to, we're going to do even less content curation and modification and moderation. And then I actually think that's a good thing, assuming 230 is not applied holistically to all tech companies, just the tech monopolies. But ultimately, we'll see. There's a lot of unknown, and what is the DOJ even going to try to do to 230, and then ultimately, depending on that, what would the reaction be from the tech company? So there's a lot of unknown, but I think ultimately what they're going to try and do is get Congress to change this law, this provision in Section 230. And yeah, I mean, that just, as opposed to trying to use the existing antitrust precedent that's in place, which to me kind of seems like a dereliction of duties, right? But it's a whole other ballgame. Hi, this is Alex from Winner Take All. Thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the content. Feel free to leave a comment, ask us questions, and definitely make sure to join us on our next live stream.